Okay, so yesterday we were looking at a straight line and we were looking at graphing them. And so what we're going to look at today is the actual equation in itself. So we can get, as I said, when you graph the certain equations, it produces a straight line. So equations could look like this. So say that's an example. Or you might even have, say that an equation that looks like that. So you can see they've both got x and y's in it, and there's no power on the x. So these both produce a straight line. But what we call the intercept slope form is when it's written like this. So when it's written y equals something, that's called the intercept slope form. And we're probably going to see a lot of this, and in our next topic, our equations will be written like this when we're talking about practical things. So you can see what we're going to see is that the slope, the slope value is the b. And remember we were talking about it, we were calling it b there. So that b is the slope, and the intercepts, if you're talking about the intercept value, that's going to be the a value. Okay, so if you look up there, so my example up there, this was the slope, 2 was the slope. So it's the number next to the x is the slope, and the number by itself is the intercept. So if we go down and look at, it says, write down the y-intercept and slope of each of these straight lines. So what you're going to say is, let's do, so we can just write y-intercept equals, so that is the value that's by itself. So there it would be negative 6. And then if we're asked for the slope, remember the slope is the number next to the b, next to the x, and it's the b value. So that one equals 9. Okay, so then if we do the next one, what's the y-intercept for this one is 10, and the slope equals negative 5. Make sure you put the sign that goes with it. With this one, this y-intercept, there is no number by itself, so you just say it's actually 0, and the slope is negative 2. And then the last one, now this is where we have this last one. It's not written in y equals form, is it? So first of all, you would write it in intercept slope form. And so what you want to do, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You could just work it out yourself in terms of what we want to do is we want to move this over the equal sign. So if we do that, we end up with y equals 5 minus 4x. So that's one way we could do it. And now we could read off the y-intercept is the number by itself, which is 5, and the slope is the number with, that should be plus 4x, sorry. When you move it over, it becomes the opposite. So then the slope would be 4. Now, you could do it like that. Now, if we know your skills of rearranging an equation is not going to be tested in general maths. That's not a skill we need you to demonstrate. So in that instance, if you're a little bit unsure, you could always write solve, and we could put in the equation. And what you do is you tell the calculator that you want to solve for y. And all that will do is then it'll change it, and you'll get your answer being, they'll write it like that for you. Okay, so you could test that out on your calculator if you want. Okay, so here it says writing down the equation of a straight line given its y-intercept and slope. So we just have to write them out. So the equation's always y equals. Now your slope value needs to go with the x, and the y-intercept is the number by itself. Now you could write it like that. If it doesn't matter if you wrote the intercept first and like that, it means the same thing. Okay, so whichever way you want to write it. So This next one, I might write the intercept first, and then I'll put the slope. So it's plus or minus. Now we don't need to have plus minus, so I can just write minus 5x. Okay, and then the last one, y equals, I'll put the slope first in this case. So just remember the b value, the slope is the number on the x. And the number by itself is the y-intercept. Okay, so if we're sketching the line, the straight line, we want to sketch the line from the equation. So in this instance, we don't want to write out a table of values. They're just asking us to sketch it. So table of values is a lot of work when we don't really want to do all that. So let's go through. So we're going to practice going through how we can sketch it. So when you say sketch it just means we're just going to use our ruler, but we don't have to grid it all up. You don't have to have, that axes divided up evenly. That's not sketching. Sketching is just when we do it as quickly as possible, and with we just need to show 2 points really. So let's have a look. It says to write the equation of the line. So if we were doing this question, let's go. So it's asked us, so we'll write out the equation. And as the equation is in intercept slope form, so it's already internet slope form, the y-intercept is given by the constant term, and write it down. So what we want to do is you want to say, all right, so the y-intercept in this case, which we've been practicing, what would it be? What's the y-intercept in this equation up here?
8.
Yeah, good, is 8. Okay, so when we talk about the y-intercept, it's where it cuts that y-axis. So it cuts it at 8. And then, so if we were sketching it, we want to draw down our label, draw our axes. So what you're going to do is you need to use a ruler, and you just quickly get your ruler, and you just want to draw two axes. That's all you have to do. And you quickly label it y, negative y, x, and negative x. Okay, so you draw that. Now we need to get a second point on the graph. Now it says choose an x value, but not 0. So remember yesterday I said choose an x value that's easy. Now they said 5. To me, I reckon 1 would be. So what we're going to do, when x equals 1, we'll put it into our formula. It would be 8 plus 2x. So y equals 8 plus 2 times 1. So we get y equals 10. So what you're actually told there is you have another point. You go when x is 1, y is 10. Yeah? So once you've got these, you've actually got 2 points. So when you've got the y-intercept, you know that x is 0 because it's going to cut here, say cut here at 8 or whatever. So the point is actually 0, 8, and then you're going to draw in your other one. So I might just say when x is 1, y is 10. So up here, and see how I just marked it. I didn't really rule out where 1 was. I just said, all right, that is when x is 1, y is 10, and I've got 0 and 8 here. Once you have those 2 lines, you just grab your ruler, sorry, those 2 points, grab your ruler and you just rule a line through them like that, okay? And then it says label the equation, so it was y equals 8 plus 2x. There you go, and that's how we do it. So when it's in, if you've got to sketch it and it's in y slope intercept form, it's pretty easy. Just put the y-intercept and then find one other point. Don't use 0 because we've already found 0. When x equals 0, that's the y-intercept. So we just use 1. I just say use 1. And you simply just sketch it like that. All right, so let's give it another go. It says sketch this one. So let's write down a few points. First of all, what's the y-intercept in this example? We've got 5. Good. And so if I said, all right, we'll find another point. So we're going to find another point, and I'm going to use x equals 1. So I would say y equals 5 plus 3 times 1. So y equals 8. So my other point is going to be when x is 1, y is 8. And remember, this one will be 0, 5. So what we're going to do is you're going to rule up your axes just quickly. Label them like that. Then we're going to say we've got 0 and 5. So I'm just going to mark anywhere. So I'm going to say that's 0 and 5. Okay. And then my next point, that if this was x is 1, we're saying it's 8. So it doesn't matter. Just make sure it's above the other one because 8's above 5. Oops. I'm a bit off there. I'll move him over. Sorry. So we've got 1 and 8. Okay, so here's my 2 points. I get my ruler and I line them up. Draw the line, and then we also need to just write the equation on the line. So just whatever they told us it was. There you go. Alright. That's all you have to do when you sketch. So you don't have to write out a big long table of values. Don't need to put a lot of points. If you found 2 points, that line will represent everything.